Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for staying. We do have a great panel, but before we get on to the panel, we would like to know a little bit more about you, the audience. So could you just raise your hand if you are a distributor in some capacity? Yes. Okay. Producers, financiers? Okay, a handful of those. Creatives, directors, screenwriters, actors? Okay, that. Any people from media, press? Okay. What are the rest of you? I'm curious. Right. What we're here talking about is marketing and publicity and really finding an audience for your film, whether that audience is the public paying a ticket to go and see it or the people who will help you bring your film to the rest of the world. I saw some interesting statistics, which is that in the United Kingdom last year, there were over 900 films released in the cinema in the last year, 2016. Over 900 films. That means that every week there were almost 20 films looking for an audience, week in, week out. So in a market like this, and that's only the film that made it to the cinema, there are 10 times as many that never made it to the cinema. So in a market like this, how is it that you can cut through the buzz? How is it that you can use social media and word of mouth to your advantage? How is it that you can get recognition through having your film in a film festival? So we really have a very strong panel who are going to share their secrets on this. So I'm going to pass over the word to each one of them to allow them to introduce themselves and to kick off the discussion, really, to tell us what's changed in the last 5 years in terms of how films get marketing and publicity and go to the film festival circuit. So, Shayashi, if I could begin with you.
Yeah, so Darpan is still very home-based in Singapore, started out from the Red Dot, moving to other markets. And what we do notice here is, so we distribute and advise indies. I do organize an Indian film festival, moving to a South Asian film festival in Singapore, again of indies. Darpan does distribute the bigger films, but we concentrate on independent cinema. And what I've noticed, Patrick, and in the recent times, the biggest thing that's happened in Singapore, because it's a very small market, and what has happened is the bigger chains have moved from only giving space to mainstream to opening up to independent cinema and giving them prime place and prime locations and not just the suburbs. What I also see in the last 5 years is the audience taste has changed. They've become picky. They come to watch the indies. And compared to the mainstream Bollywood and Hollywood and the European cinema that we see, and Chinese that we do market and have here a lot. So I think what has happened is the bigger chains opening up has helped in marketing and publicity. And the audience has opened up to come and see these films in the theaters.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Marco Müller. I've been working in a line of business that I would call festival manufacturing since 1978. So it's been 40 years now. I have been associated in various capacities, programmer first, director then, with a number of festivals, including Venice, Rotterdam, Locarno, Beijing, Silk Road Film Festival, and I'm currently the director of the Pinyao Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon International Film Festival, which is supposed to be the fourth and final officially sanctioned festival in China, but this time it is a very special festival devoted to, let's call it independent cinema. I don't know to what degree you can still maintain something that would exist as independent cinema in China, but we can move on to other questions later about that particular space. What has been precious for me is that I have also been a producer. I produced 16 features and a lot of documentaries and shorts. And for most of those features, I did use festivals as a launching pad, but I also had to work on a regular basis. I needed, the right kind of publicist for that film who would then be associated with the film from its very inception. I mean, even almost at the end of a script stage, and who would at that point devise the publicity, promotion, and marketing campaign for the specific qualities of that film. And in that sense, since Patrick has been so kind to let us know who you are, I mean, I also saw that in the floor we have a few people who are producer, directors, and sometimes even probably their own publicists. Well, it's very important that you are fighting, but you need allies. And in that sense, my recommendation would be to start with an association with a serious publicist, a press and media office who would have experience and who would have a network of contacts he can put at your disposal.
Thank you. Benjamin?
Yeah, so my name is Benjamin Dilos. I work for the Directors Fortnight as a programmer. The Directors Fortnight, it's a small section in Cannes, a parallel section in Cannes, which exists this year for 50 years. And I must confess, I was telling you a bit earlier when we were chatting around coffee that I feel like a fraud here because I'm not sure I'm able to tell people how to create buzz in festival. Actually, I would even say that we try to look in the other direction and maybe to try to have films that would sustain in time and that would stay, maybe not for eternity, but at least leave a mark. So this said, of course, of course, we hope that the film, when we publicize them in Cannes and when we open them in the Directors Fortnight, amongst other things, we give them a chance to meet audience, press, and yes, through a good publicist, which is very important. Quite often, the indies, they don't have those resources. Most festivals do hire publicists themselves to give them a hand, but it's true that it's important for the producers, for the directors to have these things clear in mind, because of course, to have your film selected in a festival, it's the end of a journey, the end of a battle, but the beginning of another one, which is often not the easiest one to fight.
So,
just to add on, like he said, what really happened in Singapore, at least, is, like you said, festival and publicity may not go hand in hand. It's the festival that actually opened ground for independent Asian cinema to come for releases and distribution. So I think the festival in itself becomes a publicity tool. That happened in Singapore and got the content in for the first time.
yes. One of the earlier panels, it was interesting to hear them saying that half of their submissions fail because they hadn't filled in the form properly. So where do filmmakers go wrong in terms of submitting films to your festivals, or what is it that they should be doing to get it right?
Yeah, but that has a lot to do again with the fact that, I mean, filmmakers should not be left alone having to deal with all the problems. I mean, the filmmaker's responsibility should end when the film is completed, and then they should be taking care of defending the vision of the film when talking to the press and media. But obviously you should have a team taking care of all these. I mean, it's a problem of phasing the work in a very concrete way from the very beginning, so that people would understand, I mean, so that any of you who would be sending a film to the festival would understand that you cannot really depend entirely on the festival. I mean, in Singapore, the space is proportioned in a perfect way so that the festival creates the buzz, it's the peak of the publicity and promotion. If you go to an international festival, if you go to Cannes, Berlin, Venice, Toronto, to the major festivals in China, you definitely would need to think that your presentation is just the start of a long promotion and publicity activity for that particular film. I mean, it's only the Hollywood films that can, in fact, work exactly the other way around. So they can actually start the campaign 6 months before the festival presentation and then use, I mean, it has happened a lot in recent years in Cannes when a Hollywood film was the opening film in Cannes. I mean, that is not something that the festival is initiating. I mean, this is something that has been, that's the problem. I mean, most of our appointments with films are decided by people who sit in front of a computer and check on a number of research lines and then would decide when is the proper time for a film to be released and which festival, in that case, would work better as a launching pad.
Benjamin?
No, sure, I 100% agree with that. It's the question of use or being used, which is important when you look at which festival you want to go to and where you want to premiere. It's also very much a matter of schedule. When you show your film, to whom, in which form, and even when the film is finished, when the film is done, and when you aim to the festival, that's the publicist activity to also maybe eventually channel up the film to a certain number of film critics, for instance, or influencers, as maybe the marketing people would say, that would help to build up the reputation of the film. This said, again, I want to say that we are very naive, and maybe also we don't plan only for the reputation of a particular film. But as we are the Directors Fortnight, we also aim to make the directors in a position to sustain their career, and so eventually, even if the film doesn't get the explosion that, you know, sometimes delusionally some people would expect by heading outside their home country, because it's not always the case that the film will instantly be sold everywhere, but eventually it builds up from that, and of course bringing the international attention to a particular director. I was thinking before coming here of some cases in the past years of the fortnight where we were particularly happy, because a bit earlier when mentioning the gentleman who made Train to Busan, which made a big success here, his first film was in the Directors Fortnight, his first animation film, which was very independent, which was a very small film, and it's only a few years later that he met the bigger buzz, let's say, just to keep with the vocabulary. And that's true also, for instance, Jérémy Saunier, who is an American indie director, which we brought with a film which was titled Blue Ruin, which started very modestly, but he is now preparing to shoot the new TV series, The True Detective, I think, the season 3, which is a big gig for a director. So again, you know, things build up. So it's good to think of the short time and of the longer time.
And maybe if I can add something, I mean, we should also mention one professional category that I don't know why. I mean, the special function has not been mentioned so far. Sales agents. I mean, your sales agent should be the one strategizing from the very beginning, telling you how to build your international marketing campaign, and at what point of that marketing campaign it should be matched with the world premiere launching pad, and then with the launching pads for all those different main territories that would be important for a healthy theatrical release of the film. But obviously, I mean, you have to be very wary. I'm talking to the producer and directors now. You have to be very wary of sales companies that would boast a gigantic catalog, because otherwise you would end up being just one of the many titles in the lineup, and they may not want to do as much specific work as it would be needed for each single film. In that sense, I mean, I can't help remembering a phrase that one sales agent told me and a group of people 2 years ago. She said, and she was a very decent sales agent. She said, look, films tend to be now like fish. If it doesn't sell after 3 days, you throw them away. So how can you trust a a sales agent who tells you this, it means, of course, she has the kind of frozen fish that can be kept and maintained alive for a longer time, and then, of course, he or she would not take care of your film.
I've got lots more questions, but this is your opportunity to pick some of the finest minds in the business for advice or even to shamelessly pitch your film. So if you have a question, please put up your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. If not, I'm going to continue the line of inquiry here, which, while you think about that, even at festivals, obviously there is a great rush of several films. How do you ensure that each film gets its own fair share of media time, attention, positioning within the programming of the festival? How do you let each film breathe of the ones that you have selected?
Well, Benjamin was already addressing this question when he said that you have to rely on some of the better critics, and in that sense, I mean, you cannot really be very fair and democratic and then make sure that nobody will see the film before the others. You know, I mean, there are some, if you're talking about buzz, there are definitely, you know, a few individual critics, reviewers who would make the difference. And those people would, I mean, if you hired a good publicist, the good publicist will always find a way so that this person will see the film in a special screening organized for him before the festival launch, before the regular press screenings. And that will really probably stir up things because, I mean, normally that person would be so happy and so pleased and so full of himself or herself that he would start saying, I have seen a wonderful film and that is definitely one of the best films of the season. And that gets the ball rolling, and the snowball effect has to be controlled and measured because obviously, I mean, if you show the film individually to way too many important critics, they will be jealous of each other. But it's one of the ways you invent the buzz, and good publicists have also a lot of different ways, including, of course, I mean, which kind of cast your film has been built upon. I mean, because of course, I mean, a star actress or actor can definitely decide on the immediate impact of any marketing initiative, any publicity stunt that is invented.
Benjamin.
Yeah, so this is absolutely a fact, yes, that those press screenings are organized and tailored for a few people that are known. Then, yeah, sometimes you can even say that you don't sit certain people next to each other, and there are, you know, the strategies go to that far. This said, you were speaking about do films get the fair share of attention? No, it's not necessarily fair, but we try. Okay, for instance, in the fortnight, we also have the question of space that we dedicate to films. Cannes is a very big event with a lot of things happening all day long everywhere. So you have to get people's attention, and for that we had no choice but also to, from the first year when it started. 50 years ago, I repeat it for the second time, but that's my way to create the buzz about our anniversary. There was 70 films for the first program. The films actually that were not only from the year that they were the year of production, but they were reaching back to 3 years before. That was a different time in film festivals around the world. There was much less festivals, and those films didn't get the window to be shown. Nowadays, very different time. So we had to think of that, and of course to reduce the number of films. So yes, every film eventually can get a piece of the attention, a piece of a media exposure, etc. But it's also true, and this it's a fact that you have to face and to embrace and to make the most of it, that every day in the festival is not equal. That you can screen in front of another big film, for instance, in Cannes, because you have sometimes, again, parallel sections, so you have competition, not only amongst the people when you submitted the film and that you had to be amongst the 20 films that would be retained, but also at the very moment your film screens, people might be, elsewhere. So it's really, again, as we said earlier, it's really something that you had to foresee and that you have to make sure that you have people to help you.
But since the world of media is changing, I mean, if by space you mean only the written paper, it's...
No, that was going to be my next question. Who are the tastemakers today? Is it the reviewers in the trade publications? Is it the film critics with a big podcast following? Is it the distributors, exhibitors, the MK2s, Magnolias, York Kinos that program those films? Who are the tastemakers today, whereas before they might have been the print ones, obviously?
But the reviewers will be the trade paper reviewers will be very important because they will always include in their review those final 3 or 4 lines assessing the market value of the film. But that is also what festivals should be there for, to prove that probably there is more in that particular film than the market value that has been associated from the beginning to that particular film. I mean, I have been director of the Locarno Film Festival for 10 years. The first thing we did was to double the size of the Piazza Grande screen, the biggest outdoor screen in Europe. So we had an audience of an average of 8,000 people for one screening. Well, when you have 8,000 people uploading, I'm not even mentioning the case when you could extract a standing ovation from that audience. Well, I can tell you that regardless of what the trades will write, I mean, the distributors who are there will immediately say, maybe this is a film I should buy. But obviously, I mean, if you're only talking about, daily newspapers, film magazines, weeklies, I mean, but the editors of the art pages, they won't any longer give enough space to the critical review, to the critical assessment of a film. So I think a lot of people are now really starting to rely on web media because in that sense it is fairly democratic. I mean, the moment the film plays in a press screening, 4 or 5 hours later, you have really, I'm talking about the major festivals, but you have hundreds of reviews.
Instant opinions, yes.
Instant opinions,
Sure,
but also serious reviews.
Yes. Sure. In your experience, whose voices mattered the most in terms of, word of mouth or good word or publicity about a film?
I think if you take a few steps back from that, I always feel, and because end of it, while I feel indies should have fair ground at festivals, end of it, they also need to make money. And a film is made so that it recovers its production cost. And it's not just a few of the laurels that happen. That has to happen. So one is, of course, if it can get itself seen at festivals, it does have that word of mouth. But as I said, if you have to take a few steps back, we advise independent filmmakers from the time sometimes at the scripting stage. Because from that, we feel is that it's that point from when you have to think about the distribution. And who is it that the audience it needs to go to? How is it needing to go to that audience? While there are reviewers, while there are publicists that do work on the film, like I was just sharing with you, there's some filmmakers who, when they come to us with a film and they say, well, this is the film and this is what is the storyline and this is how it is, and would you like to take on distribution of this film? And we say, well, sometimes we do also help with co-production, and we said, well, this is your production budget, great. Does it include P&A? And rather than having an answer as a no, we sometimes even get questions like, what is P&A? We need to put that in. And P&A sometimes,
Just
publicity...
checking, how many people know what P&A is?
Great.
Okay, good,
Thank
most
you.
of you.
And to think that there are no P&A budgets put in, and it's a chicken and egg story, because for an indie film, when they go to a large studio, the first thing the studio asks is, are you going to be putting in your P&A? And if you don't have P&A budget, the film doesn't reach the way it has to. So while that chunk needs to be taken care of and thought of from the time the film is, in a way, it's in its evolving stage, I also feel the audience today are a great part of the publicity. Like the way we distribute films sometimes is we have our little groups of audiences who we tell them that once you watch the film, make sure, and we know that they have a good following on social media, that you go and review the film as an audience, not just as a critic. And it's the common man that sees himself in the person writing to go and watch that film again. And it's a ripple effect.
Thank you. I don't see any hands put up for questions. Let me ask you a question. Is there anybody here in the audience who has successfully submitted a film to a film festival? Any film festival, doesn't have to be Cannes, so. Yes, man in the front row. Can we get a microphone to him? I'm just curious, what was the experience, and did it make a difference in the, lifetime of the film and the earning potential of the film?
Well, in fact, I've made 8 short films so far, and some of them went to festivals. And I think when a short film was accepted at Aspen Short Fest, it made a difference in the sense that I started receiving invitations for other festivals. So I think it becomes easier to distribute the movie. It depends on the festival, of course. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Can I go back to the P&A question? Because, that we have not yet mentioned also the big brother China. And in that sense, some of the Chinese companies have been very clever at knowing why a P&A budget should be sizable enough to guarantee that, for instance, your festival launch will be custom tailored to the perfect use. But of course, that depends also on how big your internal market is. In that sense, definitely some Chinese companies have been so clever that one of the reasons why they send Chinese films to Berlin, Cannes, Venice, Toronto, blah, 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 is because they want the Chinese media to discover the film in that context. They fly the journalists to the festivals, they wine and dine the journalists, and the Chinese media will be able to see the excitement that that film has created, and that will immediately reverberate, of course, on the internal Chinese market.
So you become a success in China by proving that you have international.
In that
appeal.
sense, they don't really bother to see if the film has sold well at that first festival platform. In that sense, I think a lot of the Chinese companies do something that the Indian bigger companies have not started doing, because very often the Indian companies, they treat the festival as the possible testing ground to understand if the film will have a market potential abroad, apart from, of course, the territories where the film will release day and date. And they very often come to the conclusion that no, there is not enough market power in different territories, but that is also because they didn't risk the P&A budget.
Benjamin, is there greater interest for films from China, from India, from these emerging market territories in Cannes? And do you have to embrace them, or do you find that they're more and more naturally being submitted?
We don't have to, but of course we want to. Of course, we see more and more when the production rises, we see more films. This said, it's true that India, we did that. Mainland China, not enough, and that's maybe a disappointment. That maybe so far the quality of the films that we received was not up to maybe match what we were receiving from other countries. We hope, again, it was also sometimes a lack of opportunity, the window of release of certain film that was not matching the dates of our festival, etc. That might also play a big role. But I'm sure, because witnessing the very, very fast rise in quality of production in China, as well as in festivals, I must say, without flattering Mr. Muller too much, but it's true that there are more and more interest in building a good quality. I mean, because the audience taste certainly is refining very fast, so they don't want to be sold twice the same film anymore. So I'm sure that it's going to be faster and faster. Same analysis. I'm sure that certainly Indian film, maybe more coming from the Indies, where there is a huge push to find windows. So certainly the dialogue will be more and more important between the A festivals, the bigger ones, and cinematographies. Yeah, yeah.
I think also taking on from Marcus is, I think sales agents are very, very important, and I want to stress on that because sometimes sales agents mislead in the independent filmmaker. The filmmaker is trying to find his way among the biggies. And there have been films who've done the excellent films that I've seen, and one film in particular, I won't name it, but while it did excellent rounds at the festivals, and then the sales agent also was going to be handling the release, the theatrical release. It was supposed to be in September. August, the film got aired on TV. And the entire theatrical was cancelled. And the sales agent didn't read the fine print, it seems, and just washed his hands off saying, sorry, I didn't read the fine print, and now it's aired on TV. And all the marketing, all the publicity that the team had done, the other publicity agents had done, were just washed away with that one little brush off. And I feel irresponsible behavior on the side of the sales agent of a film that had done so well on the festival circuits.
And as a producer, you must really be aware that the fine print would definitely mention also P&A marketing campaign, and you have to fight so that your sales agent will get you the right publicist, because very often sales companies, they have an in-house publicist, and that in-house publicist is not necessarily good for, I mean, he would not be a man for all seasons who can take care of
Or a woman.
every car, or a woman for all seasons who can take care of all kinds of films. And with professional publicists, it is exactly the same problem. I mean, some people are very good at dealing with, I don't know, Kitano, Kurosawa, Kiyoshi, Chinese films, independent Latin American films, but they don't know how to deal with special genre films. Other people can really build a number of events around, you know, crazy midnight movies, but they would never know how to handle a Japanese auteur.
I thought I saw a hand. No. Have economic conditions changed in terms of promoting and selling films because of the fact that the whole DVD market has died away now, and now we have to face, or producers, sales and distributors have to face, a theatrical followed by OTT, internet distribution, all these platforms. So has that made it more difficult now for films to find that audience, since there isn't this food chain that we had before?
I think I see where you are going with that question, and you want to speak about Netflix maybe and this kind of things. So because there was a kind of polemic last year with Cannes and Netflix, etc. It's a complex question, but I think that we all agree that anyway, if there is such a big player as Netflix ready to finance films that would not be financed elsewhere, then we are very happy that the films get made, that we get to watch them. Would it be on a smaller screen? Of course. we tend to prefer to have an opportunity to see them in a theater. At the Fortnite, just to make it clear, we don't have this question to take or not take films that would have been made produced by Netflix or not. We can do it. We faced a situation in a way that it was a bit reversed. Because actually it happened sometimes that we selected films that were no distribution attached, and in the end, when they screened in the Fortnite, they were picked by Netflix, and so they would never have indeed a theatrical distribution possible in France, etc. Yes, I cannot say it's not a bit frustrating, but well, that's I think you have to play by the rule. Again, this is a very unpredictable future for all those companies which are very new, which are benefiting of a lot of free money that might not be so free very soon.
I wasn't going to mention the N-word because they don't respect the primacy of the theatrical window, although I know certain festivals still allow them to participate, certain festivals in the south of France. But sorry, Marco, you were going to make...
Because eventually it always boils down to how much money can be made out of the global sales of a film. And I mean, I don't know any sales agent who would refuse an offer from Netflix or Amazon when the alternative is to try and find a VOD distributor or another platform in each individual major territory. I mean, they would always push. But that also means that the production budget for the film has changed. Because, I mean, eventually even Netflix or Amazon will not really pay as much as, you know, I was lucky because I produced a film that received an award in Cannes and then went on to receive also an Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. I was the co-producer of No Man's Land, and I remember, I mean, in Cannes, the film sold to 40 territories. I mean, I really wonder how many films now could be sold at a festival to that number of territories, and what kind of money can be made from the sales made at the festival. But as a general rule, I mean, obviously, you should also try to find the sales agent who can start the buzz, who can start the marketing campaign before the festival presentation so that pre-sales can be made. And again, you want to mention what happens with China. The moment the Berlin list, I mean, in a festival, the moment the Berlin list will be out, 80% of the film in the Berlin selection will be pre-sold to a China distributor because China distributors are quoted on the stock market and therefore they need assets. They need to prove that they have a library that includes some of the prestigious, very fresh titles that will premiere in Berlin, for instance.
Well, just to add on, what I always kind of suggest to independent filmmakers is definitely, yes, have your pre-sales in place, which includes the N-word and Amazons, because that sort of gives you a breathing space in two ways. One is you do know how much you've got from Netflix and Amazon, even if the money's come in much later. Sometimes it takes more than 2-3 years or 5 years for the entire amount to come in because, of course, they are using it from subscriber payments. But at least have the sales figure confirmed so you know if a film has been made for $1 million and if Netflix is giving you 300, 400K, you know you have to make another 500K from theatrical to break even. So your burden and your stress levels are lesser. And you also know then, but of course that's where the sales agent and the fine print comes in, that your Netflix doesn't air before your theatrical. Some films that are, what they're also doing is they're moving away from theatrical. Film lovers like me would always want to watch it on the big screen, but they're moving away and selling it directly to Netflix because they're recovering the entire money and they're not running to find those little windows for indies in big theaters.
Thank you. Those are great final words of advice from Marco Sciesci. If we can have a final word also from our third panelist, Benjamin, any insights and conclusion or words of advice to distributors or producers out there looking to you?
No, again, I wish I would be able to do these kind of things. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, I'm very naive and very, but just, like maybe, and that's why the Fortnite hired me, a regular audience, so we function by enthusiasm as well. So please continue to feed us films that give us enthusiasm, that surprise us, and I think you will create a buzz enough amongst us, but also in a larger manner.
Thank you very much to our three panelists. Our time is up, so we're now going to hand over to the final session of the day. Thank you very much. A big round of applause.